Great.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Got materials for the other two commissioners.
Yes. Mr. Green, do you want to sit up here? Enjoy the table too?
Sure.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Commissioner Brady, you want to say anything?
Well,
Or just...
you know, I think you're all...
Do you want to go around? And...
Yeah, that's
Sure, I'm Blair Brady from Madison County, current president of Wasatch.
I'm Diane Dory, Lewis County Assessor, and incoming president of WACO.
Becky Butler, Budget Manager. Jeanette York, Director of Public Health and Social Services. Rita Lester, Clerk of the Board.
Edna Fun, Lewis County Commissioner.
Brian Green, I'm an independent journalist.
Lee Napier, Lewis County Community Development.
with a mouthful.
With a
Everybody's
mouthful,
got that.
and president of the County Planning Directors Association.
And I'm Eric Johnson, Association of Counties.
And I'm Eric Martin. Did I skip you? I'm sorry.
No, you already
I started.
Okay. Eric Martin, County Manager.
We could have played with you for a while. I'd skip over the president of my association.
Oh.
Yeah, must be nice to be the new county administrator to be able to do that.
Oh, I know, so he's happy not to be here.
All right, well, thank you very much. You have any?
Yeah, I'd just say, you know, we've been going around primarily eastern Washington the last month or so, doing some courthouse visits. We want to make sure that everyone has an understanding of the processes we're going through and have made in the process of how we're going to proceed going forward. And glad to see so many other departments here because it's very important that everyone understand what we're doing, why, how, and if there's any consequences that we may have missed, to make us aware of them. Continue having open lines of communications, but not just with our county family, with the public. A critical point of a critical process of this whole endeavor is informing the public so they have a full understanding of why we've been pushed into this position. And it's going to be an ongoing, you know, this is not necessarily a short-term fix, but it's something that begrudgingly we have to do. And with that, Eric, you're on.
Well, we'll do this very informal, so if people have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Again, I'm Eric Johnson with the Association of Counties, and I'm sorry, here, get a couple of...
My fault, I was late.
And time, what's our time? We've done this in less than an hour, and we've told people we got to leave in 2 hours. So,
Until 3.
okay, so great. So,
Just enough time for me to get a parking ticket.
That's 30 minutes.
No, I'm in the 2 hours.
yeah. So, so I have 2 handouts for you. The one is one we're going to spend most of our time on. So our courthouse briefings this year have really been focused on 2 elements, but primarily our strategic litigation and communication program that I'll spend most of our time talking about. And a number of you have already heard many elements of this and maybe even sat in on meetings associated with it. And the second one is our 2018 legislative recap. We'll talk a little bit about going into 2019 legislature as well, as that's part of our strategic litigation and communication program. So I want to put that into context for you and why the association has in fact headed in this direction. And Commissioner Fund has heard this either as a member of our legislative steering committee and or a member of our board of directors numerous times. But a number of years ago, our members, really meaning the members which we represent, which are the county commissioners, county council members, and the county executive. So it's the 139 members that we represent. And then there are departments beneath them. So we have relationships with the County Plannings Association or the Public Health Association or the County Administrators Association or County Engineers Association. So we represent and serve them in some capacity as well. But our direct client in our members is the elected officials. So that's who we serve. And over the past number of years, they've grown frustrated, I think is probably a nice way to put it, to be honest. And that over the years, they started looking at options besides just legislative advocacy. And during that period of time, the members started to kind of take on the old Einstein mantra, which is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results was the definition of insanity. And I think our members really got to that point of saying, we can just keep doing this over and over again, lobbying and being advocates, and it doesn't change the needle. Things aren't changing, particularly around what we consider financial sustainability, which is the most important thing for our county legislative authorities. Is most of our members are not interested in growing the size of their government. They're not. But they are interested in being able to meet their constitutional and statutory duties that are outlined either in the Constitution or the statute. We are constitutionally and or statutory agents for the state of Washington. Counties are required to be created in Article 11 of the Constitution. The legislature is required to create a uniform system of county government. In 1948, that was amended to allow for the charter process, which you all are having the excitement to go through right now. We've had 7 counties that have gone through that process clear to the end to change their form of government. I believe Skagit County may also be on the ballot in November. They just had signatures that were delivered to their county auditor. So not unusual, but it is unusual when the form of government actually changes. It's more often that it does not change than change. And so our members just started to look at alternatives. We've increased our communication strategy, for example, trying to communicate more directly to the public. We did editorial board meetings a couple of years ago, and universally, the media in particular understood the plight of counties and understood that the way that we are funded, which is typically property tax, the 1% cap has a stifling impact on our ability to deliver the services that we're supposed to. If you were to look at a pie chart here of county government, about 60% of county government tax revenue is property tax in the current expense fund. That compares to about 12% for the state and about 20% for cities. So 1% property tax cap has a disproportionate impact on county government. So then you go into this chart that I show you on page 5, you start to see what's happening. And because we are not a big sales tax, we don't have business and occupation tax, we don't have utility tax, that impact is dramatically different. You look at the state on the top right, they're the green revenue bar. That green revenue bar is growing as much as 12 to 16% on an annual basis for the state of Washington, compared to us, which were about 1 to 3% revenue growth. Our expenditure growth across the counties is generally 3 to 5%. So we're in this constant mode of having to see some type of adjustment. And there's costs that are far beyond our control at times. Cost of retirement, sometimes cost of health care. When you have binding interest arbitration, that adds another dynamic when a subset of your workforce, maybe even in county current expense fund, and the sheriff and jail combined might be 50% of your workforce, has a salary that you don't get to control. And that's a problem. That's a real challenge for us. So we have another handout I could email you, which is just don't take our word for it. We have studies that go back to 1988 that show the challenges that county government are either having then or are going to have because of decisions that either are happening through citizens' initiative or by the legislature. So our members actually took up a couple of ideas. One of the ideas they took up was what I call civil disobedience, where there were items where they simply said, we're no longer going to do them. We simply are not going to do them. The Growth Management Act being one of those ideas, that we're in the 6th year, the 3rd biennium, of really no grants to cities and counties to perform our responsibilities under the Growth Management Act. Our members just can't get themselves to civil disobedience from 2 perspectives. The first is they took an oath of office, and they just can't get themselves to ignore the statutes and laws. We chuckle at that because the state agencies do it all the time, but we just can't get you all to be belligerent enough, I guess. And so we really appreciate that, but we can't get our members to this civil disobedience, let alone could we all agree as 39 counties what we're not going to do. The other reason is we could potentially expose the county to significant third-party lawsuits in any number of items that we choose not to do. And so you start having this conversation, if your risk manager or your attorney was here, they would start twitching at the concept of not doing certain things that we would expose us to liability. And so we started talking about litigation, which is ultimately more framed around legal activities, but I'll phrase it as litigation. In part because it seems like litigation is something that the legislature and executive branch have responded to recently. You look at McCleary as probably being the primary one, but you also look at the True Blood case associated with how the state of Washington was not providing the mental health and behavioral health services that were required, and we were boarding folks that should be in mental health or chemical dependency institutions, either in a hospital or the jail, and not in a way that was legal. So we have the True Blood case. So we know the legislature actually, when pushed to shove, will in fact do that. So we have been looking at a litigation. And then along came the ballot drop box bill in 2017, and at the same time came the resolution to McCleary at the same time. And two of those issues combined really stunned our members. The first was the McCleary decision and the McCleary response. We've been asking for a new property tax cap, that property tax cap of inflation plus population growth. Not just an arbitrary 1%, but a reasonable cap that mirrored our more of what our expenses in our property tax were actually meant to deliver. And we asked the legislature to deal with that for us. Instead of dealing with that for us, they swept the levy swap and then removed completely the property tax cap for that portion of the levy swap. So they gave us no relief, and in turn gave themselves, and depending on what's happening in your market, maybe a 25% increase on an annual basis.
Because they
exempted themselves. And so, that was a pretty bitter pill in our members' mouth. And then the ballot drop box bill, requiring the counties to put in 250 new ballot drop boxes at a estimated cost at the time, and I think it will be more now, about $1.2 million for those new ballot drop boxes, and an annual operating cost of about $250,000. So you look at Okanogan County, it's probably our poster child. They will need to put in 16 new ballot drop boxes. The round trip to check those 16 ballot drop boxes is 450 miles. And on election night now, that means they have to have 16 new workers if they're just going to lock them, and 32 if they're going to collect ballots that night. And so with no new operating costs. And so we will be challenging that, and we'll get to that, but that was one of those elements where our members say enough's enough. And there are a number of our members that, frankly, you couldn't sue the state fast enough. So they directed the board of directors and particularly the executive committee to begin to look at what it would cost and what a litigation or legal activities program would look like, and how would we merge that with communication. And ultimately, I think our members are now saying, how do we have an advocacy program, a communication program, and a litigation or legal activities program that harmonizes together to advance a policy agenda? That's ultimately, I think, what our folks are saying is, how do these three elements work and how do we move forward? So last November, the members authorized the proceeding, authorized a dues increase of $400,000 to proceed with a litigation and communication program. But they also said, we got to be thoughtful about this. We just simply don't want to take one-off issues and begin to litigate, but how do we be strategic in this? And so they set up two committees. One committee to help us understand how are we going to make decisions as an association about what it is that we're going to litigate on or sue on. And that, I think, has become a really thoughtful process. And the second one is, then what are the issues going to be that we actually will take on? And so from about January through, end of January through mid-May, we had two work groups that were going through this process. We had representatives of our association, we had representatives of the Prosecutors Association, we had representatives of the Washington Association of County Officials, we had some staff members present. It's a group of probably 25 or so people that ultimately broke into two groups, would come back together periodically, and they recommended an interim policy on how we would proceed, and also recommended the types of issues that we should first take on. And so in your booklet is both a March update and a May update that takes a little bit of the context of the work groups that they did.
Yeah. Just for a second, just to back up ahead, when I say we've been forced into this, Edna's been at some of the meetings where we've had senators and legislators and the governor come speak to us, and basically they just said, we'll tell you whatever you want to hear, but if you're not suing us, we don't hear you. We're not going to do anything. And then we've had the governor come speak to us and just flat out tell us, you need to play hardball, which is kind of ironic because he could have vetoed a lot of things that have not been good for us.
Right.
But just to put it in context, we're being pushed into this position.
Yeah, other questions before I kind of move into kind of our update of our action plan for 1819, or comments, or feel free. So there's really four items to it. I probably should pay more attention to how we graphically illustrate this, but there's really four items, and they're on pages 8 and 9 in your booklet. The first is our 2019 advocacy, and we just actually added a fourth item to our advocacy program for 2019. I'll talk about that here in just a moment. The first one is deals with public defense or indigent defense. Is the county spend $300 million a biennium on indigent defense. It has grown about 60% over the last 8 years, primarily due to primarily due to caseload standards that were established by the Supreme Court. Not because of more felony filings, although that has been some increase depending on your jurisdiction, but it really is directly related to Supreme Court rules establishing new caseload standards. That $300 million, as I said, had grown about 60% in about the last 8 years. It's growing about 12 to 15% annually. I'm not sure how your county relates to those numbers, but I suspect you're seeing growth as well in the cost of that. And so, our state of Washington contributes about 16 million, or about 4% of the cost on a biennial basis. We rank, depending on the latest statistic, 44th to 48th in indigent defense contributions from the state. I think only Utah and Pennsylvania may be actually less than us, where counties may actually pay full freight. At one point in a Justice in Jeopardy study that was done by the courts in 2007, we ranked 51st behind Puerto Rico in state shared revenues to the trial court system. So it is our burden. And when you're running a trial court system that is primarily funded by property tax that grows at 1%, that's a challenge. That's a real challenge for us. The second one is public health. And so we have been working with our public health affiliate on foundational public health services. Both of the top two items are really directly related to a little bit of a mantra that we have put. The first one, kind of the justice by geography, which is depending on where you're at and depending on your jurisdiction's capabilities to provide funding, may actually mean the type of type of justice that you get, and likewise, it might be the type of public health services you get, because not all counties have the ability to fund these, and yet every Washingtonian, regardless if you live in Garfield County, Lewis County, or King County, should have equal access to the same degree of justice, and also they should have the same access to public health services. It shouldn't matter about communicable disease prevention or response, regardless of where you live. Those communicable diseases don't know a geographic boundary. We're the agent of the state of Washington in delivering these services, and based on our ability to pay shouldn't be how we deliver those. So asking the state to provide and deliver these base foundational public health services, and I'm sure Danette can speak ad nauseum about this issue. I come and go about once every other month into those meetings, and I know you're deal with those all the time. The anticipated request is $70 million. My understanding is that number is now significantly larger. And I think there's a meeting next Wednesday, I think, to kind of hone onto what that number might actually look like in a request from the Department of Health through the governor's office.
That's a scary.
It's a scary
number.
Yeah. Well, the scariest larger number is one that we just added. And this relates to a decision associated from the U.S. Supreme Court on fish passages or culverts. The state of Washington was sued by, I can't remember, 20 tribes, I think, but primarily in the case area of which you are a part of the case area, at least part of Lewis County is a part of the case area. I think primarily the Nisqually, I can't remember if there's other portions of the county that are part of the case area. And in the case area, the state had 800 culverts. The estimated replacement cost for those 800 culverts, it was about $2 billion. And the courts basically said you have to replace those by 2030, which is now about a 12-year period.
Sorry, can you say that amount again?
800 culverts, $2 billion, with a B. Yes, with a B. With a B. The estimated cost per culvert, I think, was at 2.3 million, and now is about 3.4 million, I think, is the estimated replacement. Because most of the time you're now doing a short span bridge to restore just not fish passage, but also some functionality of the stream or creek or river. I think Pierce County's most recent estimates were there, it's 3 to 5 million in Pierce County for their most recent culvert.
We build them cheap down here, it only costs us $1 million.
So only
Yeah,
$1 million.
right.
Good.
Bargain business.
Good.
Good luck.
Yeah.
You know, we want to put Volkswagens in, they want Rolls Royces.
Yeah. So our numbers look a little different. In the case area, we have about 2,500 culverts that have been inventoried. We think there's probably another 1,000 culverts. This is counties. This is the 14 counties. Of the 2,500 that have inventoried, we believe there's 1,500 that have what's called substantial habitat above them. Substantial, by definition, is 200 meters. Doesn't seem like much to me, but it apparently is, so 200 meters. You start doing the math. We believe it will take $577 million a year if we're going to meet the 2030 deadline as well. That's $577 million a year. The total property tax collection into the road fund across those 14 counties across all 39 counties, excuse me, is $479 million across all 39 counties. So if you were to transfer your entire road fund property tax, you can't even get there. There's bank capacity in some road funds. If you were to go clear to 225 per thousand and have the legislature say we're going to move you all to 225 per thousand, which you can imagine how popular that would be with the citizenry, that would get you maybe 200 million across the 39 counties. So absent a solution from the state, which is either a new revenue source, the state providing a revenue source, giving you a different revenue authority, I don't know how we get there. I frankly do not how we get there. So we've added this to our legislative agenda. We want the state not to just find a response to their $2 billion problem, because here's the situation: for every one culvert that the state of Washington has, there's 2 below and 7 above that either cities or counties have. So we know that the state fixing their problem does not solve fish passage issues. And we can continue to plug off. We probably do 1 or 2 a year, probably in the road fund. I don't know how many.
On a good year.
On a good year. And I suspect your county probably has a couple hundred, would be my guess. I don't know if you've done your inventory or not.
The Chehalis Basin has a pretty extensive inventory, and there's, I mean, ours, yeah, there might be that many. I mean, in the basin itself, on private property and everything, there's thousands.
Thousands, yeah. So it's a significant issue, a significant potential financial issue for us, and so we've asked that. Then the last one is kind of an interesting, proactive legislative agenda item, but it's to resist new unfunded costs associated with legislation. That we recognize that the legislature is the responsible party to pass policy bills for the state of Washington. But because we also have an unfunded mandate statute called 43-135-060, which was adopted and passed by the citizens in 2 different citizens initiatives, I think Initiative 60 back in '79 and then Initiative 601 in the 90s, both of which said basically this: is the legislature, if it's going to be a new program or increased levels of service of existing programs, you can't pass those bills without providing the resources to be able to implement those. And we will continue to stress that. We actually started developing a ledger 2 years ago to show the legislature, particularly towards the end of session, that here's the set of bills that you're about to pass that could cost us, almost last biennium was at $1.45 million. That ended up probably about $25 million across the 39 counties. With no additional resources from the state to pay for those or new revenue authority to do it. And clear to us, clearly violation of the unfunded mandate statute.
Well, their budget projections were almost $2 billion more.
Right, yeah. Yep. So that's kind of our legislative agenda. They talked about other things, but never just really got themselves there, particularly around things like behavioral health issues. I think there's a lot of our folks that are still struggling with what and how full integration looks like, and how does that affect the crisis system, how does that integrate with the criminal and civil justice system. So I think we still have a ways to go in probably putting some, at least policy direction together for counties as it relates to behavioral health.
Something else to touch on would be, we're not just looking at a litigation strategy alone. There can be, as Eric can probably tell better than I, there's AGA opinions we'll be looking for. There'll be some amicus briefs, joining on with other parties. There's a lot of different options that are included in this process, rather than just, let's go out and sue the bastards.
Yeah, that was the maturation, I think, of the...
No shame in my game.
Where's that from?
So,
Does he have to participate?
Oh, yeah, you got this kind of box here for the people like you.
Don't encourage him.
I'll put my pen back.
Well, give me a pen, so I'll put a buck in there for you.
Oh, there you go. I'm afraid he'll pay ahead, so please don't.
I don't have a 20, do you?
Schulte used to do that, in fact.
So, I mean, this was an interesting area of what I call maturation for the organization on this. Is that in May of 2017, we had probably a vast majority of our members were just ready to sue their asses.
Yes, you do.
So, I mean, they were that
That pen
assertive.
just went up to $2.
I mean, they were that assertive and aggressive and angry, frankly
Yes,
angry and frustrated.
truly.
And so the group really matured to say, how do we utilize legal tools or legal activities, just not litigation, as Commissioner Brady.
Cover you and I both.
Those are good fun. It goes United Ways.
So swear away.
Start swearing away.
I hate it when, So we really are serious about. It's just not about litigation, because in fact we may not litigate very often. How do we work with our county prosecutors to do more AG opinions, and let the state do some of the legal research that we would otherwise potentially have to pay for? How would we coordinate, for example, the ballot Dropbox bill? This is still yet to be a determined legal strategy. We've had 8 counties that have submitted claims to the state of Washington. All 8 have been denied. Do we coordinate a legal case against the state with those 8 counties? Do we take one of those counties, like Snohomish County, since it might have the most resources, and they actually are the plaintiff, and then we intervene on behalf of the other 38 counties, or do we do an amicus brief on behalf of the other 38 counties? So there's different potential legal strategies that we might go forward, and that will be part of kind of the discussion. Are there times when we should do friendly lawsuits where and I will use the example we use about this, which is really the Drummond case, where Island County, we knew this statute was always in conflict. What was the limitation on the boards of county commissioners using outside legal counsel? We always knew. And so should we have said, we want some clarification on this before it got ugly and personal? That might have been an example where we would have done something differently. So there's different modes that we could potentially be thinking about, and clearly amicus briefs. We do amicus briefs. We do more and more amicus briefs. So that's some of the legal activities. I appreciate, Commissioner, that it's just not about the county's associations being a plaintiff. So then there's 3 other items that now link in with our advocacy. Number 1 is communication. Our members firmly believe that we have to be more aggressive in the manner in which we're going to communicate, both with the legislature, but also with the general public. We've done a lot of, and we'll continue to do a lot more editorial board meetings on issues associated with this. The unfunded mandates, we were just yesterday in Seattle talking with both potential firms to represent us, but also a communication firm that had been doing a little bit of analysis. Is the unfunded mandates polls really well in our favor. Really well in our favor to a significant degree. And so messaging more assertively around what we're hearing is really true.
I explain that almost every commissioners meeting we have to the public and whoever will listen, that we don't want to be suing the state. We're using tax dollars against tax dollars, which is crazy until you really understand that what they're doing is picking your pockets, my constituents, your constituents' pockets, and depriving them of services that we could otherwise be providing possibly. And people get that. They understand it. And I keep telling them, when the legislators come to town, you need to be asking them, hey, what are you doing to fix county's problems? And they tell you to go talk to the commissioner, tell them you have. The problem's in Olympia. What are you doing? And that's the message we need to get out there.
Yeah, and that's real.
And I think we've been documenting our unfunded.
You guys do a good job.
And Becky really did an outstanding job with that document.
Yeah, I appreciate
together.
that. It's a model that we forward and utilize quite a bit.
So.
Yeah, Kitsap, Grays, and Years are the 3 that we routinely send to folks. I really appreciate that. That came in. So the 4th bullet, I think, is really mirrors on under communications, or the 4th item, where we really are going to be more aggressive, reminding that every time the state shirked its responsibility in providing funding for one of their statutory or constitutional duties that we require, particularly the new ones, it makes you have to find funding, which means there's something you're not going to be doing. And in this county, I think your county is dealing with services that you used to provide. I sat there and had to
Yes, you
wrestle with
did.
the same thing, whether it was
Yeah.
Parks and Recreation, whether it was senior services. Those are the things that we're no longer doing because we are having to do services that the state is passing on to us without additional resources, and that is just a harsh reality. Sometimes it's chronic and incremental. Every time they make a modification to the DUI statute, which is probably really good public policy, but no resources to cover it, it becomes your obligation. The state has not built a new state penitentiary in almost 30 years now. How many counties have built new county's jail for additional capacity? It's because of the sentencing guidelines. Sentencing guidelines is meant to keep people in the county jail rather than the state penitentiary. And now we have to watch the same thing on the behavioral health because they're not interested in building. In fact, they're interested in downsizing Western State, which means they're going to be more community-based, properly so. But are they going to provide the resources to that, or is it going to end up back in our responsibility?
And will they continue it? They provide
And will they
resources
continue it?
now, will it continue?
Yeah. They lured counties in the mid '80s with jail construction dollars, and we built them and we filled them, and now we're doubling the size of capacity in most of our departments.
70% of the people in our jail don't belong there. They should be receiving services elsewhere.
Yes, yep.
We're
Talked
holding
about that yesterday.
for mental health and chemical
Yep.
defense.
Yep.
And that's so wrong.
So our group has took a next step, which was, okay, what's the next step in litigation? And so our board of directors has directed us to investigate 3 specific areas, and really a 4th one that I'll talk about, in working with our legal committee that we've chartered, working with outside legal counsel. 3 specific items. The first one, which is an interesting one, a little bit linked to perhaps what you have going on with the charter process, but the legislature, again, going back to Article 11 of the Constitution, the legislature is required to create a uniform system of county government, and that is the 3-commission form of government. You're a uniform system. They do have the ability to create classifications of county. They used to have 5 classifications. I'm sure Assessor Dory remembers probably when there were 5 different classifications of counties. That statute has since been removed, so are no longer. But by forcing Spokane County to become a 5-member commission by district, targeting 1 county, really, in our estimation, violates the uniform statute requirement in the Constitution. And so we're interested in challenging that more from seeing where the courts are at on uniformity, because we think this is a bad precedent. It's the reason that the Constitution was in place, so the legislature didn't pick and choose how they wanted counties to look. They wanted uniformity. And uniformity in our mind goes more than structure. It's also about service delivery as well. We act as the agent on behalf of the state of Washington. And so uniformity in the way we assess property, uniformity in the way we collect property tax, uniformity in the way we do elections. But when you start to have different capabilities to pay for those services, do you have uniformity still? And so we're really interested to start to push this boundary about what uniformity actually might mean besides just structure as well.
Out of curiosity, in Spokane, this was presented to the voters, and every district voted against it.
Yeah, 2 years earlier, this actually was a ballot measure, and it was rejected by every precinct. Yeah, so a lot of politics to this. The D's, Spokane County, countywide, it's very difficult to get a Republican elected. Excuse me, a Democrat elected. Sorry, there's 3 Republicans, and so the D's in the House and the Senate see this as a way. If you go to district only, as you probably can imagine, they can probably get 1 if not 2 D's elected in a district-only election. So there's raw politics to it. You had, and then on our side, you had a couple of members of the House from the Spokane area thought that'd be a good gig to have. So let's, which is a transition we have generally seen in the urban areas, is the legislators becoming members of county councils.
It should be the other way around, actually.
Yeah.
Well, and the constitutional provision of uniformity is what's kept the legislature from just being able to combine counties, because that was a bill every year for about 12 years by a Seattle legislator. And that's why they couldn't do it, is because of that. clause.
Just piggyback on that a little bit, the irony was they did a very expensive study on combining counties, and they did not get the results they anticipated. They found the only savings were combining big counties, not little ones. And that was not what they were looking for.
They've done a similar study with public health.
And they'll do it again.
Found the exact same, done the same.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, really what they find is that, in Garfield County, I always use Donna Deal, the county auditor there, she's the recorder, she's the licensor, she runs the elections. It's a working position. It's not like when you're not going to eliminate an FTE by merging those types of positions together. And then, so the next issue is the ballot drop-off. We've talked about this. This is ultimately a statement of, if the legislature is not going to hold themselves accountable to the statute, then we're going to ask the courts to hold them accountable to the statute. Whether we ask for the remedy, which is to rule that the statute is invalid, legislation is invalid, or whether or not we'll ask the legislature, or ask the courts to mandate that the legislature has to pay. I don't know what the remedy will be yet, but we're looking at what those different remedies might be. But ultimately, we want better case law statute around this issue, and in particular, increased level of services. It is a very ambiguous term in the legislature and in the legislation or in the statute itself, and so asking for a better clarification, getting the courts to provide that. We've actually been talking with Waco officials and staff about unfunded mandate statute, or strengthening the unfunded mandate statute. The politics behind doing that is probably pretty difficult. I'm not sure the legislature wants to add any additional accountability to themselves under unfunded mandates. At the same time, there's really a couple of states that have really good statutes and actually have a path forward. Both New Jersey and Massachusetts have one that I think has a separate board, and then I think the auditor's office, state auditor's office, has a place where you can refer it to and say, we think this violates the unfunded mandate statute, and then the state auditor actually has to make a ruling for it. So there are some alternative modes that we have been talking about. We think, we've actually met with some legal counsel, suggested that we run a citizens initiative. We do not have initiative, we do not have that authority to do as a quasi-public agency, but I suspect that would be a pretty popular citizens initiative, would be my guess. The last one, from a direct legal action that we are suggesting, is that this would be something that we would begin to work on in 19 and 20. And this is to ask the legislature fails to respond to our desire to begin to implement additional funding from the state on indigent defense, that we would begin to initiate litigation against the state of McCleary-like, that the state is failing to meet its constitutional duty to provide funding for indigent defense. That the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling was that it is the state shall provide indigent defense. Our state has pushed that onto the counties. There are, I think, 26 or 27 states where it is 100% provided by the state and then gradiates downwards. We proposed a bill last year that didn't go very far, but it is a 10-year phase-in, $30 million a year for the state, and out of a $44 billion state budget, it's hard for us to say that the state can't come up with those type of funding to be able to begin to take this on. It's the state court that is creating the increased costs for us, so we believe the state should take on a greater responsibility. The last item is that we are looking for, this is where some of our partners really come into play in talking about additional causes of action. We really are interested to know, what are the additional causes of action? Hey, Commissioner. What are the additional causes of action that you see and run into? And we really are interested to garner additional thoughts as they might relate to that. So, oh yeah. Yeah, so as we talk and reach out to other elected officials, as we reach out to department heads, if there are other items that you see that are making us think that, boy, this just doesn't seem right, or this is not fair, or this violates statute, we are looking at other causes of action and putting that, and how would we put those into the discussion as it relates to an overall strategy to advance our policy agenda. So we have some administrative activities that we'll be working on. We have some bylaws changes to make, working on the 2019 budget preparation with the officers to say, how do we continue this? You heard Commissioner Brady indicate early on that if we're going to be in this, this is a long-term endeavor. This is a long-term endeavor. And the potential, as I start to get sticker shock as I talk with outside legal counsel, the sticker shock is pretty significant as well. At the same time, we'll explore other ways to recoup attorney's fees. That if the unfunded mandate statute might be a good example where, listen, why would we not be able to recoup attorney's fees when we're asking the state to simply fulfill its required statute? They are not, can we recoup attorney's fees? And so there's other areas that we're exploring as well to be able to do that.
So is there any chance, especially on indigent defense possibly, is there any glimmer of hope that the state might say, hey, we realize this now and without the litigation, or is it just going to have to be the constant pressure of litigation, of threats, or call it what you want, because you can only threaten so many times. If you don't follow through, you might as well keep your mouth shut.
And that's the way I thought about that also, is I anticipate that, as Eric pointed out, developing some case law as to build up that, and by following through with these 3 or 4 smaller items, somewhat to show that we are following through with it. But I truly suspect they will offer us a carrot of some sort this session to basically try and buy us off. And my opinion is that we do not, fall for that. Basically, we continue. I think it's important that we show our sincerity and that we have developed this capacity, even though we wish not to use it, we're willing to and able to, and basically build a little war chest that they see as, they are serious. And it's unfortunate they were at this point, but yeah, I'm with you. We're going to have to show the sincerity and carry through. And it was very interesting that all 39 counties supported this when we decided to proceed. And that in itself is a heck of a message, because we're the ones who have daily contact with all their constituents. They don't, we do. And for us to get them to start asking the legislators, why aren't you fixing these problems, is critical.
Commissioner, I don't know. I wish I had the crystal ball. We think we make a pretty compelling legislative argument that if you were to look at the revenue chart growth, the state's revenue growth it pales in comparison to ours. And we have been discussing the justice by geography concept in on the Senate floor this last year. They made our argument for us when they were talking about repealing the death penalty. The main argument about repealing the death penalty is because different counties have different capacity to pay. Therefore, they're making charging decisions on the death penalty about whether to charge the death penalty, because it costs a lot more to do a death penalty case. And you actually had the Grant County prosecutor this last year actually say, I didn't charge because we couldn't afford it.
Right.
That's one murder away from bankruptcy.
So that's quite a statement. When and it gets back to our uniformity statement, is if you now all of a sudden are having counties that are having to make, and elected officials that are having to make certain choices based on their county's ability to pay, how is that equal justice under the law in the state of Washington when we are responsible for the trial court system? And so we really are trying to make this statement to the legislature that there are certain things that you really should accept the responsibility to pay for, so there is uniformity across the board. Now, we gladly will continue to implement it. If you want to centralize indigent defense services under the State Office of Public Defense, go ahead. Feel free to do that. At the same time, we've said we'll continue to administer. You just have to pay for the caseload standards that are in place. And so that's, at the same time, we don't know what the remedy would be. If we brought in several different groups during this process with our committees, and one of the groups that we brought in was DWEA on McCleary. The McCleary remedy was never what they thought they would ever get. I mean, if you would, obviously, some in the education community just don't think that the remedy is either enough or appropriate. So once we get into litigation, we may think we know what the remedy is going to be, but it may not be what the court suggests the remedy to be. We could lose. So
I spoke to a ranking senator, basically, for all intents and purposes, said, bring it on. And I don't mean that in a positive way.
Oh, Yeah.
There will be repercussions. And vengeance is mine, says the legislator.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I've had a number of conversations. My conversation back to that is, what does that say when 139 county elected officials are so disgusted with your performance to providing services, have said we're going to litigate? Does that not bother you at all? These are the folks that are every day are delivering the services that they're required constitutionally and statutorily, and they're so frustrated they're willing to litigate. Does that not mean anything to you?
The other impact that I think that we need to make with the legislature is it's not just indigent defense. Obviously, these are a big chunk, but even during the McClary decision, where they were mandated, or to do something, they passed on unfunded mandates down to the counties to be able to implement the new levy, to be able to, figure out how to make it all work in our computer software and all of the things that went into it. There's tax statements, revisions, all of those things, fund distributions. Not any of that was taken into consideration. It just says, here, you do it. And so when you add up all of the unfunded mandates, it's huge. It's not just a drop in the bucket, it's a huge portion of the county's budget, and it grows every single year. So they've gotten away with it, so to speak, up to this point. And what they need to do is realize that, okay, enough is enough, the scale has tipped the other direction, and remedy it all, or it's just going to go for a couple of years and come right back.
See you at the ballot box.
And a lot of it isn't even in the form of cash. It's more responsibility, more requirements for staff. I mean, we deal with that just as an example with the DVE requirements we have for contracting. I mean, they push all those responsibilities down to us with the threat of losing funding if we don't comply. It's ridiculous.
Well, and the funny part about the McClary thing in that state levy was they require about 14 reports from my office after we do levies and things. They made us make their changes to the reports. They didn't even send us the reports with the changes on them that they wanted. We had to do that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think this is this is the next the maturation. I think for us, there is a myriad of things that we could potentially choose to use legal activities on. And I think that is really clear. And for us is how do we be strategic in identifying which ones are those going to be as directly as it relates to an overall policy agenda. And for us, so far in the recent times, it really is around county fiscal sustainability, about the long-term view of how do we assure that the counties have the resources that it takes to fulfill our constitutional and statutory duties as an agent of the state of Washington. And I think that's where we continue to focus. And we've suggested more than once, if you go back to our fiscal sustainability, new revenue flexibility, and reforms, that we still believe there are reforms. And if the state's not going to continue, like we use the Growth Management Act, if this was passed in the early 1990s, the state provided a lot of grants for us to implement that. Commissioners and council members throughout the state took a lot of political heat in implementing that for the years. And now that there's no resources to be able to do that, state, if it's not important for you to pay for it anymore, why do we still have to do it? And so do the reform and repeal that, or make it optional, or make it subject to when there is resources to be able to pay for that. So we continue to talk about other reforms as well.
So I guess my question then is, we've talked about one, that there's, if we decide to move forward on this, there's going to be a whole litany of, it's going to be all-encompassing, right? It's not just going to be indigent defense. It's going to be other topics or other unfunded mandates. We're going to put it all into one nice little bow, right?
There'll be a vetting process.
Pardon me?
There'll be a vetting process when things are presented to the LSC and whomever, and then it goes through 3 different stages of steps prior to deciding to litigate something. We really built a pretty robust check and balances there.
So if I understand your...
I don't think we're going to do a 50...
No, we're going to cherry pick the ones that we think...
We want the low-hanging fruit to get the case...
Priorities.
Yeah,
identify the priorities.
Yeah, we not only the priorities, but the ones with the best fact pattern.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, for indigent defense, to be really honest, indigent defense may not have a good fact pattern for us. It may be more of the messaging and communication than, because we're going to ask the courts to intervene in a legislative action potentially, which is a funding issue. And is that a separation of power issue or not? I mean, that was the big discussion over McCleary. And so we would be doing a very much McCleary-like, asking the courts to say that they're not meeting their legislative responsibility to provide funding for a constitutional duty. And then you add the complexity that in Article 11 of the Constitution, it's the state that gets to create us. Therefore, does the state have the authority to tell us what to do? I mean, the fact pattern for indigent defense may not be our favor. This is kind of the bring it on, and some people would say, yeah, bring it on, we'll take it. And at the same time, you know, we want to appeal some regards to their responsibility as legislators as well, as budget makers.
Currently, they have no respect for us. That's bottom line. A perfect example is in 48 hours, they drafted a bill, and in 72 minutes passed through the House and the Senate to exempt themselves from public records. Fortunately for them, the governor vetoed that. They're going to revisit that this session, I assure you. And we've asked for a seat at the table. They don't want us there. Now, this is a state issue. So what? It's pretty crazy. So, you know, they forced us to this position. Hopefully we can get some wins, get their attention, and not have to really continue. But we need to maintain the capacity and the willingness to do it should we have to.
My fear is if you attack one thing like the indigent defense, in the meantime there's a legislative session going on, they can pass 6 more.
And we'll be watching those, and hopefully when we have, hopefully we get case law established on their obligation to fund it, we'll be letting them know right off, you know, this is another litigation issue you're bringing forward.
Well, the other issue too is their fiscal notes that they are or
Yeah,
are
where
not
are they?
able. Yeah, exactly. And very few things have fiscal notes these days.
Anymore.
We're not required to do it anymore.
Yeah, they're not.
No, only when requested by a legislator, actually.
Right. And
So-
nobody else can.
Yeah, which would be one of the things we talked about in unfunded mandate statute, which would be the requirement of a fiscal note for every bill that affects local government. You know, I think Assessor Dory raises a really interesting point, which is the legislature has a lot of tools at their disposal as it relates to unfunded mandates. I mean, they instead of just putting a null and void clause at the end of every statute that affects local government, they could put in a clause that says RCW 43-135-060 does not apply to this statute. They could do that. We get unrestricted dollars. We get unrestricted liquor control money. We get uncontrolled city county assistance dollars, and there are flexible dollars. They could condition those flexible dollars and say the ballot drop box bill, pay for ballot drop box bill, X million is conditioned to pay for it, and so it's no longer flexible. And there's the shenanigans that a budget writer, and in all due respect to Senator Braun, the shenanigans that they have the capacity to do on a pretty routine basis would be ones that they could potentially do. But again, as we integrate advocacy, litigation, and communication, that would be a communication feast for us, for them to start playing games. And the media, the Olympia-based media, the Capitol-based media, is really hungry to write and to talk about this. They're fascinated by it. They're fascinated by potential litigation, but they also are fascinated by the dispute between counties and the legislature right now. So questions or?
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah.
Eric, have you, so on that fish passage
Mhm.
issue, have you heard of any pending litigations or whispers of litigations from tribes against local agencies or private large landowners or anybody else besides the state? I mean, now that they've prevailed,
Yeah.
you'd think they'd be chomping at the bit.
And it'd be a pretty quick, it'd probably be pretty quick. too.
Yeah.
A summary judgment would probably happen pretty quick against us, but we've not. I think in part because the tribes, I think, are hoping for a broader legislative fix and legislative response. Representative Wilcox had a bill. The bill only had $50 million annually associated with it, though. But he had the policy bill and then a potential funding bill. So I think the tribes, and we communicated with the tribes about our desire to have a legislative fix. I've been really clear with them is that absent either a new revenue source locally or state funding, I simply don't know where we would come up with the type of money that is necessary for us to meet these by 2030. And then we really talk about the practicality of meeting by 2030 when you pump out that type of money into the contract field. I don't know what that would look like. So we've also been talking about getting the legislature to be thinking about this more on a reach basis or a watershed basis or prioritization basis.
Sure.
And that let's look at letting a contract that would potentially kind of our bridge bundling concept that we had before, but let's, okay, we're going to take care of everything on, pick your, Percival Creek, I don't know, pick your stream or creek, on Scatter Creek, pick Scatter Creek. It might cross multiple counties, but if we're going to really take care of fish passage and make it meaningful, then the fish doesn't care whether it was a city culvert, a Thurston County culvert, a Grace Harbor County culvert, a DOT culvert. We still have the railroads to deal with.
Yeah, so boy.
So you think about Puget Sound. What do you think the big barrier is before you ever get to a city, county, or state culvert? It is it's a railroad that runs along there. And yeah, dealing with the railroad, you think,
Yeah, right.
Dealing with the railroad, you all know.
Bring it on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good luck.
Good luck. So I think, it's definitely a big issue, I think, for us. Besides just the funding, is there better strategies to approach it with better environmental outcomes?
Well, and politically, it would be suicide for them to insist that all of the road funds in the state, plus increasing them, would go just to fish culverts, and in the meantime, county roads and everything else would fall apart.
We could use their casino money.
There you go.
So I think
partnering is not a bad idea. Maybe
No,
it's
it's
not
not.
directly
It's a
casino,
great
but
idea.
certainly you would think.
They have an interest and a benefit.
And it seems like the tribe's revenues have gone way up in the last 10, 20 years, and I don't know what they're doing with it.
So we would, I think.
I know I help them with it.
So we are.
Yeah, me too, me too.
So we have added the culverts of Fish Passage Barrier to our legislative priority. We'll be going out to the membership here in the next couple of weeks for final adoption and approval of it. I don't know whether the tribes will act very quickly or whether they're satisfied with the state and hopefully for a legislative remedy for sure that cities and counties do it. Follow in suit, or whether there'll be a good policy bill that really will address a more comprehensive replacement strategy than just the state fulfilling its judicial ruling of 800 culverts and $2 billion. Yeah. So we've been meeting with legislative leaders. Our new transportation public managing director of our County Engineers Association, Jane Wall, has already started reaching out with legislative leaders, the executive branch, to talk about this. I met with the Gov staff on just on the culverts issue and our litigation piece as well. So we're talking culverts in particular as I run the financial numbers. That if we become subject to the case, it's crippling. It's potentially crippling without either a new revenue source from the state and or the state, simply paying for it.
I have a question for you. Secretary of State qualified the pollution tax. Is there an initiative that's going to be on about November? That's more than the carbon tax rerun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it going to be the same thing that the governor told us it was going to be, where there's going to be money, this money's taken and put into a grant funding system that
Outside the reach of the
outside the reach
legislature.
of the legislature, but the problem is that money's going to come out of our back pocket, and we're going to have to fight for those dollars with other counties. As I understand, that's the way that's going to look. And I think, what was it, $15 per metric ton of what they consider to be pollution? They're going to start, that's going to be the starting fine if that thing passes? It's an initiative, right?
Citizens initiative, yeah.
Is this because it just got completely defeated in the legislature? That was the next step, take it to initiative?
The proponents of the legislation have always said that they would attempt to gather signatures if the legislature didn't act.
And I also understand there's a lot of money that's already been thrown at this.
I'm sure there will be a lot of money. There's a couple, I think there's 3 initiatives. I think there's 3 initiatives that were certified. I can't remember for sure, but there was that. There's one that preempts, and we actually don't think it has any impact on us, but it preempts our ability to do local grocery taxes, which is basically the sugar tax out of Seattle.
Right.
We actually are surprised because we don't think we have statutory authority to do that. We'd love to say we can add any tax we wanted.
Coca-Cola and Pepsi have both put
a lot of money into that, and then I can't remember. There might be 4. There might be a gun one too. And then I think there is one associated with use of deadly force. I think there's a.
Oh, yes.
I think that one might have. I can't remember if that one got those signatures associated with as well.
The pollution tax, is going to have a dramatic effect.
Yeah, my understanding, the polling actor is not very positive right now on the carbon tax, so I don't know how that will plan out. As soon as our folks, generally when you'll see polling for these initiatives might start higher, but as soon as negative ads come out, you see as much as a 10% drop as soon as negative ads start coming out. So
I think the tax bill's 25% up had a big effect too.
And titles are deceptive as well. That's the other unfortunate part. If you read the title of a citizen's initiative, that makes sense. Yeah, why not? Why wouldn't I like that? So
you got to read the pros and cons of every single one of those when the voter guide comes out.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly why they changed it from carbon tax to pollution tax, because people don't like pollution, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Any other questions?
So, as we kind of move forward, we'll continue to keep you apprised of where we're headed with particularly any litigation activities. As members of the board of directors, you clearly will have the potential to hear more, particularly if it relates to any attorney-client privilege information, if we reach that stage.
Right.
At the same time, we're pretty committed to be pretty transparent throughout this process, because it's part of our communication strategy not to look like we're trying to hide something. We really want the legislature and the citizens to realize that this is not the path that we chose to go down.
Right.
But if the legislature is not going to hold themselves accountable to the statute, we are going to ask the courts to hold themselves accountable, particularly the unfunded mandate statute. So, good.
And I think if you want us to go with you to the Chronicle or the other media,
right?
Certainly.
Yeah, I know that we will. We had a wonderful editorial in the Spokesman Review until the last line was, but spending money to sue each other is just a bad thing. And I think our members don't disagree with that.
Yeah, we don't like it.
No.
I think it's been our message on, unfunded mandates, and when we're cutting services or reducing services, that's the message we've been consistently putting out. But, it's the general citizen doesn't know a lot of the unfunded mandates. They don't realize how much we pay for indigent defense or for medical for the inmates, which is another huge cost that is increased. So.
Or why we're not fully funding libraries or museums or childcare, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all direct causes.
Right.
The other thing that I found very interesting with McClary is the reason that they had a citizen sue was because they thought the schools or somebody else with tax dollars would look bad, and they felt that they had a better chance getting a citizen to sue instead.
Right. Interestingly enough, as we start talking about strategy, that has been one of the potential strategy suggestions, even on indigent defense, is that we find someone who had services potentially through a public defender. At the same time, we also don't want to suggest that any member of the public did not get adequate indigent defense, because that's a whole other.
That's a different.
That's a different lawsuit.
It's a different lawsuit. Our argument.
Fortunately, they're all getting good service.
Yes, they are.
They are. We get the money.
And so this really is about the constitutional duty of the state.
And granted, that's true, but
Yep.
you're right, the last sentence, that's what they're gonna pick up on
Yep.
all the way across now.
So we've continued to, and we'll hone in on communications messages, we'll hone in on those types of activities as well, because communicating to the public is huge. I mean, this is, and indigent defense is a tough one for many members of the public to suggest that, well, we do what? And yet, it is a core component of the United States Constitution, which is the right to counsel.
Well, the Supreme Court upheld it, so.
Yeah.
Great.
Great. Well, thank you. Any county issues that we should be paying attention to, or?
How much time you got?
Apparently
So I
45
was
minutes.
expecting how much money you got.
Yeah,
Well, I was
right.
gonna get to that.
Yes.
Well, on a whole nother issue, I'd still like to encourage y'all to reconsider your NACO dues at $1,500. You know, you received over $2 million this year in direct benefit from the lobbying efforts of NACO with your PILT and SRS. And I did send you the information to join in, get your name on the underfunded PILT payment,
Yep.
which is over $8,000 for you guys, should you get it for $1,500 in dues. A lot of, Bobby, you told me you weren't really sure all the benefits. That's the biggest one right there, that $2 million plus. But another benefit for your community is, doesn't cost the county a dime, is prescription drug cards. They're free. NACO sends you all the advertising, he puts together a video for it, and the people that served are mostly are underserved. Folks who maybe have very poor insurance or no insurance can save up to 24% on their prescription costs. And there's actually an option there that a county can receive $1 for each prescription that's filled under that program, or not. We chose in my county not to take it to increase the benefit, and they come in Spanish and English, any way you want them. And there's a lot of programs like that. Another one, which is great for your kids in school, is called iCivics, where they actually have these coloring books that teach kids about county government. And they're free. They'll send you as many as you want. And listed in there is a website for a game. And this game is, one's designed for elementary school, the other for high school kids. That teaches kids about government, and from all the feedback we're getting on it, kids love it. They play it like any other game. You gotta tell them to stop. And they're learning about county government the whole time. And that's at no added cost, including being a member of NACO. And the other benefit is that by our being 100% state, we get an extra board seat and votes on the National Association of Counties. So there's a lot of pluses. And for you guys, a couple $1 million for $1,500, that's not even 0.5% of the benefit you receive from the lobbying efforts. And I will say that was a major issue in the last few years with NACO to push for that full funding of PILT and SRS, and it's coming up again where they're doing a PILT fly-in here pretty soon, aren't they? And so I'd like you to look at that and maybe reconsider it. I understand it's tough time. We have the same problems, but there's some things that are definitely hell of a payback. Oh, another $1. There we, no, that's not a swear word.
It's a place, right?
So I'd just like you to reconsider it, and if you'd like any more information, I'll keep forwarding things to you. But those two programs, the prescription drug plan, the iCivics, and helping to support continuing getting PILT and SRS fully funded are very critical to you guys. And many others. In my county, we really, I think we got under $500 because we don't have the federal lands in Coyote County, but we still fully support.
Yes. Thank you
Yeah,
for all
PILT and
that.
SRS are an interesting one. PILT goes to county current expense fund. I think you're about, say 400,000, I can't remember, 600,000.
Well, it had been 170 to 2, and then it went up to 429 last year, but then we got 1.2 million this year.
Yeah.
And
And
that
then,
is fully funded for the
Right.
first
Yeah,
time. That was the
huge.
lobbying efforts of NACO.
Believe me, I called the treasurer to make sure they called the bank to make sure it was correct. I was like, I don't
Cash the
know.
check
Yeah.
first.
yeah, and then SRS, road fund dollars.
Yeah.
And we lost it for 1 year. I think they funded 17, 18, but they didn't fund 16, I think is what it was. So Yeah, so and I don't know, you guys must be about 800,000 million, I can't remember.
800, yeah, around 800.
That goes directly to the road fund, so.
Have been significantly more.
Significantly, yeah. Skamania County has done a phenomenal job putting a program together, kind of displaying what happened, you know, from pre-spotted owl to then spotted owl payments to then SRS to now new SRS. And, you know, they've gone from, it's stunning, they've gone from about almost 268 employees to about 125 employees over that period of time.
Only, what, 2% of their land is not
Yeah.
federal or state,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, it's pretty stunning.
But across the western states, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
But that's another thing too, is I've seen PILT go like this in 1998. Lewis County, because I did it, was involved in a PILT study for the federal government. And by the time I got done with them, there were 3 different areas in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and I guess besides Lewis County, Montana, that did the study. And they found out that they were underfunding us by about 80% when we came up with the actual amount, and what they would pay in property taxes versus the benefit that they're, you know, deriving.
Or the contract they committed to doing.
Right, exactly. And so that's another resource that we've seen go sideways on us.
That's why the lobbying effort is so important. It's a major issue for the National Association of Counties.
What's hard is we can't depend on like that 1.2 million continuing because it's approved on an annual basis now, right?
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, so hoping for a 6-year reauthorization of PILT would be the ideal, whether they can get there or not. And, you know, part of the problem is the federal government just continues to see a lot of CRs. I mean, that was what the problem was with SRS for years, is when they just do a continuing resolution, it's not included. It doesn't do us any favor.
No.
So, yeah. So, and the other reason you're at a higher SRS payment was because of not having, your PILT payment is based on prior year payments of other federal land, so because you didn't get SRS, you got the higher bump in PILT. So there's actually the complicated formulas. Our increase in PILT actually came at the expense of other PILT counties that used to not be SRS counties. So it's kind of a loser for some of the other counties as well.
Yeah, you can see that in the comparison of the 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Appreciate
Good to see you all.
Yes.
If you have questions anytime, comments, if there's something going on in the county and you want us to, you know, do a little research into, or, you know, have you heard this? Kind of like the tribal lawsuit, have you heard about it? Please.
I'm sorry, what do you need?
Grab the sign-in sheet behind you.
Yeah, we can do that.
Perfect.
Yeah, just don't hesitate to give us a call, shoot us an email.
And you guys have been great with Wausau participating, and, you know, that's what helps make it work. You really represent your constituents well there.